Chapter 7. A Calling to the Seminary, Loud and Clear. The events that occurred that summer and the years that followed challenged my own memory. Yet this is precisely how it took place. I am making no attempt whatsoever to exaggerate or to improvise. During the summer, my buddies and I would play baseball almost every day in a field on Vernon Highway in Meldrum, about 2 blocks from home. I was usually in the habit of pounding the fist of my throwing arm into the glove to strengthen the pocket as I walked. Out of nowhere, a clear and distinct voice spoke to me as I walked along. Yes, the voice was actually addressing me. There was no one physically present on the sidewalk. There were no bushes or trees to hide behind. Could this be actually happening to me? So I listened. "Why don't you try going to the seminary for 1 year?" it said. I hesitated, then answered very slowly, not knowing if this was some kind of prank or sick joke somebody was playing on me. Why should I? Besides, I have already signed up for St. Joe's and paid part of the tuition. I could not believe I was speaking to a voice coming out of thin air. You can easily get your money back, but if you do not try the seminary for at least 1 year, you will never know whether God was calling you to the priesthood. You could regret never having tried. Naturally, I thought about it. It's not like every day you hear a voice counseling you. There had to be a reason, so I said I would try for 1 year. When I got to the field and saw my friends, I told them I was going to Sacred Heart Seminary in the fall. I did not share with them the mysterious advice I had just received. I was really afraid to tell anyone about conversing with someone I couldn't see. As predicted, I got my money back from St. Joe's. I told Sister Lucinda about my decision. She was delighted. I discussed it with the associate pastor of the parish, Father Ferdinand de Knut, who I admired a lot. He gave full approval. My family was happy for me, a little surprised, but happy. In spite of the general moral support we received from our families, we were all too aware that we were still a long way off from ordination to the priesthood. They told us in our first year at Sacred Heart Seminary that only about 15% of our class would probably be ordained 12 years later. That percent did not include the students who would come in after high school or after college. I had no idea whether I was to become a statistic. Since we lived in Detroit, I naturally chose to be a day student. I would be present for classes and then return home. I was welcome to stick around after class and study in the library or play sports or visit with friends if I wished. I chose none of those. My greatest difficulty was just getting to school and returning home. I had to take 4 buses just to get to class. We had no car, and my father did not drive. My brother was in the Coast Guard, and World War II was still going on. We lived so close to the downtown area that the Verner bus was always crowded by the time it got to Mount Elliott. The bus just did not stop when it was full and nobody was getting off. They were all going downtown. Downtown Detroit was a very busy place in those days. The businesses were all flourishing and people went there without fear. The streets were crowded with shoppers and the offices were full of workers. Many times 2 hours would go by. I am still standing there at the bus stop. It wasn't so bad in the pleasant weather, but winter was unbearable. I literally experienced freezing to the extent that at some point I thought my fingers were going to fall off from frostbite. My mother would look at me walking in the door. She knew immediately what happened and would make me some hot tea or hot cocoa. I would hold the cup in both hands to bring back warmth and feeling. It was important that I study what I missed in class that day. I never fell behind in my studies or in my marks on report card day. My marks were not all A's. I had a few B's, which was not all bad. I spent much of my average school day on the bus. That first year was really tough. My absence from class did not go unnoticed. Within the last week of school in June, I was called in by the rector, or head of the seminary, Monsignor Donnelly. I wondered what I did wrong. After all, I had no demerits. He asked how I was doing, then came to the point rather quickly. "Are you a sickly person?" he asked. "Why, no," I replied. "Then why do you miss almost a whole month of school this year?" He was anxious to know. I told him about my problem of taking 4 buses. He sympathized with me, but spoke in very clear terms. "I'm afraid you will have to board here next year or leave the seminary. You cannot continue to be absent that many days regardless of your grades." I was stunned. I had never been away from home. Even when I went to Camp Ozanam for the summer, I was always accompanied by my mother or my classmates. But to leave home for a whole year, that was hard to agree to. I told the rector I would think about it. I had the whole summer in front of me. You probably guessed it. By this time, I almost expected it. My friend, the voice, spoke to me of many advantages of living at the seminary. No more hours of bus rides each day, no more freezing fingers, no more disgusting winter, standing at a bus stop. The list is long. I was told by the voice that I would make a lot of good lifelong friends at Sacred Heart. And there would be time to play baseball, basketball, handball, tennis, and cards. There would actually be a study time where no one would bother you. Just think. Ample time to read. I could come home once a month for an afternoon, a week or so at Christmas and Easter, and all summer. It began to sound quite attractive. I told my parents about my plan to board. They were not overjoyed, but they were supportive since they would see me periodically during the year. Also, they could and did visit me once a month on Visiting Sunday for families. 2 good reasons why the seminarians in general like it when I got visitors. First, my sisters and some nieces always accompanied my parents. Girls were always a welcome sight at a boys' school, seminary or not. Secondly, my parents always brought delicious Lebanese pastries, infinitely tastier than the seminary desserts. The boys feasted on behalf of my family and the families of other students. Boarding at school was certainly much more practical. It saved time. As predicted, lifelong friends were established. I played every sport I could, including those I failed to mention: ping pong, pool, and football. I excelled in handball, pool, ping pong, and not bad in baseball. I pitched hardball. I even went swimming once a week down the street at an indoor pool open to us seminarians. There I learned to dive, do flips off the diving board, do the 1.5 pike, and a host of dives that I wouldn't dare attempt today. I passed the test to become a lifeguard, should I so wish. In the evenings, we played cards. I learned to play pinochle, bridge, euchre, and rummy. There was time for everything. Don't get me wrong. Studies came first, of course. The curriculum was similar to any high school except for the emphasis on Latin, religion, Greek, and a modern language. Math, biology, social studies, literature, English, ancient history, medieval history, American history, physics, algebra, etc. were basic to receive a high school diploma. When I was in the 10th grade, boarding for the first time, I attended religion class and had an unforgettable experience. The professor, Father Joe Sismazik, asked the class a rhetorical question one day. "Has anyone ever seen a human soul?" He asked, definitely not expecting an answer. But being naive and terribly honest, I did raise my hand. In my innocent mind, I was willing to answer his question. Father Joe Schmo, as he was called since nobody but the Polish students could pronounce his last name, correctly anyway, looked at me surprised and had a smirk on his face like a cat about to play with a canary before devouring it. "So, class, we are going to find out at last what a human soul looks like." He was watering at the mouth. I started out simply. I believe the best time to see them is on Ascension Thursday. I remember so vividly the vision I shared with my sisters and my brother at the cemetery. I interpreted the bright objects as souls. This was not the response I got in class that day. Only laughter and giggling filled the air. I knew the professor and my classmates were making fun of what I had said, but it didn't matter. At this point, I felt impelled to tell my story, so I continued. They're about this big. I made a motion with my hands indicating that they were oval-shaped and about 1.5 feet in length. More laughter. What else can you tell us about souls? They appeared in different colors, soft pastel colors with a beautiful source of light coming from within. They were now roaring, splitting a gut, as we used to say. They were finally rolling in the aisles when I pointed out that the cemetery was the best place to see them. This occasion represented my first attempt to share this wonderful experience with persons who were preparing for the priesthood. I had hoped they too had mystical experience and could talk about theirs as well as mine. I presumed the seminary was a perfect place where young men were trained in prayer and meditation, and where they had personal and mystical encounters with the Lord. I thought by chance someone else might chime in about their encounters with God or one of the saints. Never happened. This whole episode in my life was a total bummer. Surprisingly, none of my classmates teased me about it after class. However, I did notice at supper Father Joe was in the center of attention among the priests and professors on a separate long table about 30 feet away from us. They were all laughing about something. I prayed it wasn't about me. The next day, I was walking in one of my many corridors at the seminary. Coming straight toward me was Rector Monsignor Henry Donnelly. Good morning. And they're about this big, he gestured and laughed. I thought to myself, I'm finished, expelled, kaput. But as with my classmates, the topic never came up again. I felt the need to retain my sanity concerning the vision, so I decided to write to my brother, stationed in Greenland, to my sister Rose in California, and to my sister Elizabeth in Detroit, asking if they remembered the mystical vision and explaining to them the embarrassing situation I encountered in my religion class. I also wanted their honest opinion. Did I make it up? Was my imagination overly active? Was I a dreamer as a kid? Was I accustomed to telling wild stories? I was very excited to hear from all three of them. Each one of them in separate letters strongly affirmed that we did indeed have the vision. It was a real experience. We all saw it. Don't let anyone ever talk you out of it. No, you did not make it up. What you said was the truth. They were all surprised that in a seminary of all places it was not investigated as an authentic message from God or our Blessed Lady. It was all but forgotten. None of us was ever officially interviewed. It was never documented. We were actually afraid to talk about it publicly. I suppose if there were someone, perhaps a priest, who reported it to the bishop and called us in to talk about it without fear, something may have come of it. On the other hand, unlike other visitations from the spirit world, what we saw only occurred once. There was never an ongoing communication with a heavenly guest. The whole incident remained only in our innocent minds. It became just a memory, but that memory has reminded me all through my life that there really is a spiritual world. There really is a hereafter. And other extraordinary events in my life supported belief in God and other invisible realities far beyond my understanding. Chapter 8. Miracles Do Happen. I witnessed 3 miracles early in my teen years. These were, in a sense, affirmations that God is actually in the world, and I was blessed to see the work of His hands. Ever since I was a baby, my mother took me and my other young siblings down to the National Shrine of Our Lady of Consolation in Cary, Ohio, about 60 miles south of Toledo. The statue of Mary holding the child Jesus has been accompanied by healings ever since it was enshrined in 1875. In 1945, it was getting close to August 15th, the day on which Catholic Christians celebrated the Assumption of the Mother of Jesus into heaven. It was also the same day which pilgrims from all over the U.S. made their way to Cary. In this small, insignificant town, tens of thousands of people would gather for the celebration of the Eucharist and for the outdoor procession, ending with a special benediction and possible healings. I said to my mother a few days before leaving on the 14th of August that I was going to see a miracle on August 15th. She explained that miracles can happen, but no one actually sees them. I repeated my conviction that I was going to see one. "Why are you so sure?" she insisted. I did not have a good answer, but I could only say, "I heard a voice tell me so." "Well, we'll see," she added faintly. At that time, it was more practical to stay overnight, making it a 2-day trip. Otherwise, finding a parking spot the next morning would be very difficult. Also, it was not possible for the hotels to accommodate such a huge crowd from out of town. People slept almost everywhere imaginable, in their chairs, on the grass, in their cars, in the park nearby, in church, and in whatever niche available. We chose to sleep on the pews in the basilica. That's what the principal church was called. The next day, we attended religious services conducted by the Black Friars, Franciscans, who were in charge of the shrine and dedicated their ministry to the widespread devotion to Our Lady of Consolation. They were called Black Friars simply because they wore black garments instead of the usual brown ones. Soon it was time for the grand procession to begin. People were moving into position to line up for the procession. I, in turn, was looking for someone who desperately needed a healing. There was a lot to pick from. I saw people slowly walking with crutches or a cane, others on stretchers, and still others in wheelchairs. I spotted a young man about my age in a wheelchair. I looked at his feet. There weren't any, and no shoes. Only twisted, gnarled bone from knees down. He needed a miracle badly, I thought to myself. He's the one. I asked my mother if I could push him in the procession to the Shrine Park altar, while the thousands of people prayed and sang hymns along the way. My mother saw no problem with that. Of course, I had to ask the mother and her son if they accepted my suggestion. They welcomed the idea with a smile. Our two mothers, who till that day did not know each other, walked behind me and my newly found friend. We both had the same idea. He wanted to have normal legs and feet, and that was my prayer too. The procession was about to begin. The distance both ways was about a mile. Everyone was praying devoutly. I was too, but I couldn't keep my eyes off the feet, if you can possibly call them feet, while I prayed along with them. We finally returned to the front of the basilica. There were so many people that the benediction, which is a blessing with the Eucharist, took place outside on the front steps. There were at least 10 steps, so that visibly was not a problem. It was impressive to see the thousands of pilgrims on their knees, some kneeling on grass and others on the rough pavement of the road or sidewalk. I did not hear anyone complain. They were happy just to be there. Then began the sacred moment. The priest raised the Blessed Sacrament above his head and made the sign of the cross with it. All eyes were focused on the makeshift altar, more specifically on the sacrament which we believed was a powerful gift of Christ's presence. Then it happened. I saw movement in the young man's legs. I am not sure whether he was paralyzed from the waist down, but he apparently was unaware of it himself. He was still staring up at the altar. The next scene was so powerful, with the legs sort of gyrating, turning, twisting, or perhaps unraveling. that suddenly before my eyes I was looking at 2 perfectly shaped legs and feet. That did it. I couldn't hold back any longer. I yelled at the top of my voice, "It's a miracle!" I kept repeating it. My mother tried to quiet me for fear of embarrassment. All eyes were turning to this young voice that kept yelling, "Miracle!" Benediction was now over, and I could hear a ripple of people repeating the word miracle. The mother of the young man asked me if he was able to stand up. I again spoke very loudly. "Stand up? He can walk." Both of us grabbed an arm and lifted him up. He stood on his own, then slowly took a few steps. He was ecstatic with joy. So were we. The boy and his mother thanked me. I said, "Oh, please, thank the Lord. He's the one that did the healing." What I was most excited about was the insight given to me beforehand that I would witness a miracle. That event stayed with me a long time. Unfortunately, we never documented the healing, although it was witnessed by thousands of people. Today, that would be the first order of the day. I do not remember his name, and I do not know what became of him. It really didn't matter. I was only an instrument of someone much greater than I. During another visit to the shrine of Our Lady of Consolation, my mother, my sister Billy, and I prayed that Billy would be healed. She was unable to eat and keep any food down. Her entire digestive system shut down to the extent that she could not even keep water down. Naturally, after a short period of time, she was starving to death. Dr. Dwally, our family doctor and a specialist, examined her thoroughly without success. They were totally baffled as to what was the cause of her condition and what could possibly be the remedy. She had made many attempts to eat only to have the same experience, throwing up. The worst foods, of course, were greasy ones. However, her condition had the same effect even with the most nutritious food. The only positive note about the whole thing was that she had developed this rare condition close to August 15th, the day we go to Cary, Ohio. It was about the only thing we could do. When the time came for the grand procession, the 3 of us walked and prayed side by side. Nothing so grandiose occurred, such as the boy in the wheelchair receiving brand new legs and feet, but we prayed with great confidence because miracles were not exactly foreign to us. And Billy was present when we shared the vision over the cemetery. Upon finishing the procession and benediction, Billy demanded to get something to eat. She had a great yearning to have a hamburger. My mother quickly reminded her that she couldn't keep anything down, much less a greasy piece of meat. Billy insisted on trying to eat again. She said that during the procession she felt some activity within her from her throat to her stomach. It could be interpreted as hunger pains, exhaustion, thirst, or something like that, but not diarrhea since nothing entered her body for so long. Each of us was excited in our hearts, just hoping, it was more than just a feeling. We were expecting a miracle. As Billy put the greasy hamburger to her lips, my mother and I held our breath for a moment to await the outcome. Yes, the food stayed down. She ate without any discomfort. She was cured. The 3 of us hugged each other with tears flowing freely. Then we gave thanks to Our Lady of Consolation, who once again brought consolation to those who sincerely asked for help. Needless to say, the doctors who examined her after the return home had no idea what she had nor how it went away, nor were they ready to proclaim the change in her condition a miracle. They simply could not understand how it could have healed itself, and they are slow to admit the cause was divine in origin. The 3rd healing I witnessed was, wouldn't you know, back at the shrine of Our Lady of Consolation. Our small delegation from the Detroit area made the trip once again. We left on the 14th of August and arrived around noon. This time we had planned to meet relatives coming in from Richmond, Virginia. They had lived next door to us at one time. The Yesbicks were related to my father's side, but Mrs. Amina Yesbick was my mother's best friend. It was one of her daughters that they presumed I would marry someday. That, of course, never happened. Tilly and I were the same age, grew up together, and were good friends, but nothing more. She eventually married Mr. Oley. Her sister, Sadie, was part of the plan to meet and carry. We set up a time and a place. Sadie brought her daughter, Mary Magdalene, hoping she would be cured of a severe eye condition. She was badly cross-eyed. The glasses she wore were helpful, but in no way corrected her sight. The glasses helped a lot, but when you looked at her, it was obvious that she was still impaired with some double vision. With the glasses off, she absolutely could not function. It was truly sad to see a child that physically challenged. We all had a nice visit and ate of the food we brought with us. Mother always packed a good meal for travel. That evening, we were in the basilica in front of the altar dedicated to Our Lady of Consolation. We decided to stay right there and spend the night. We prayed together and recited certain devotions. It didn't bother anyone, since each family group had their own prayers going in many different languages. We were in the middle of the League of Nations. It was a long day. I imagine I went to sleep in the middle of a prayer. My cousin Sadie and I sat next to each other. Her daughter slept on her lap. Since the girl's body was just a little too long for one lap, Sadie placed her daughter's head in my lap as well. With one hand gently covering her forehead and eyes, and the other hand holding a rosary, I prayed myself to sleep. I didn't know whether it was possible for a person to sleep in a sitting position all night. Yes, it is possible. I didn't move at all. When we awakened at daylight, we were all in the same relative position. As if by habit, Sadie immediately gave Mary Magdalene the corrective glasses to wear. She tried them on and said the glasses hurt her eyes. We all looked at each other. Either her eyes got better or they got worse. We were anxiously waiting to find out. Her eyes were no longer hugging her nose. Instead, both eyes were perfectly aligned as they should be. She was healed during the night. We had hoped for a cure during the procession later that same day. We did pray with deep faith, but it was now a prayer of thanksgiving. With her pupils in the center of her eyes, my little cousin's face was a beautiful sight to see, and her response of gratitude was overwhelming. Thank you for listening, and stay tuned for the next reading of Father J. Samonie's book.